Welcome to this week's edition of Coach Prep. I'm flying solo this week. Coach Don's on a well-deserved vacation. We're going to talk today about coaching the hard-to-coach player. Before we get into that, though, I just wanted to send a heartfelt thoughts and prayers out to everyone that suffered through the hurricane. It's been a crazy couple of days here in the South, and I know many people are going to be recovering for a long time. I was very, very fortunate here. We had about 12 inches of rain at my property. But I had a couple of tree branches down and otherwise made it through without any real issues. So I feel very, very blessed and fortunate. My road was flooded for about a day and a half, so I couldn't get out to go do anything. Fortunately, we got through it pretty much unscathed. But I know a lot of other people are going to be recovering for a long time. So our thoughts and prayers to everybody that's been dealing with the aftermath of the hurricane, and hope everybody's lives get back to normal as quick as possible. So the topic this week, coaching the hard-to-coach player. One of the things that we talk about quite often is attitude and those different kinds of things and how important it is. But the one thing that I wanted us to touch on, we mentioned a few weeks ago on Everything Fast Pitch that coaches have to always keep in mind that they're changing lives and they have the opportunity to change lives. The balancing act is how much can you do or how much are you able to accomplish with players that bring a very negative attitude. I had the good fortune of not having to deal with this a lot with players that I coached because being in the college world, we had a chance to pretty much hand select the players who played for us. And attitude being such an important piece for me, it was pretty rare for me to have to deal with, the quote unquote bad attitude kid. But I have had the opportunity now in the lesson world, in the instructional world, of working with a lot of kids that you could look at and at first blush say that she's got a bad attitude. Now, there's lots of things that can contribute to a player having a quote-unquote bad attitude. Maybe they're not a hard worker, they're kind of a lazy kid. Maybe they've got a negative way of portraying themselves or interacting with other people. Maybe they come across as being kind of entitled or spoiled or whatever it might be. And the one thing that I can say is, when I'm working with young players, and especially I think I see this more and more with younger players now, where they're not being held accountable to treat people the right way, to be accountable for how they're acting around other people, that I periodically get to deal with a player that is certainly somebody that I would say is tough or problematic or bad attitude or however you want to characterize it. What I've started to do more and more is see that as a challenge from a coaching perspective. Now, again, it's a slightly different world because I'm not trying to fit this kid into a team. So for coaches, when we're talking about fitting these players into your team, that's going to be a little bit of a different dynamic and something that you're going to have to always be, paying attention to. But to figure out ways where I can pull out the good, you can exaggerate and accentuate the goodness in a kid, can find out ways to kind of reward and reinforce them when they do act in a more appropriate or a quote unquote better attitude type way. And the reason that I see that as a challenge in this setting, I think I have a chance to hopefully help a player maybe get on the right track. One of the things that I see quite often, and I think that this would hold true in a team setting too, is there's so much pressure on players now to perform that a lot of the fun of playing kind of gets taken away from them. And so one of the things that I try really hard to do with the players that are a little bit harder to work with or maybe a little bit more distant or whatever it might be, to exaggerate the fun things that we can do, making more and more parts of what we're doing in a lesson competitive or fun or a little bit more dynamic. So instead of just hitting balls off a tee, let's do some target practice. Let's keep score. Let's make it competitive. Let's compete you against me. Those kinds of things. And the reason I think that's important is I think if you can start to exaggerate the positive, exaggerate the fun aspects a little bit more, that quote unquote difficult player maybe is a little bit less difficult. And maybe that leads them to enjoying it a little bit more. If they enjoy it a little bit more, maybe they come with a little bit more enthusiasm or a little bit more positivity the next time. If they start to see the fun that they can have by playing versus the difficulty or the frustration that they often feel, I think that that's just a win-win situation. And so to my way of thinking, difficult players are always going to be part of the equation, part of the landscape. The real trick is, how do we respond to it? We ask players all the time to control the controllables. Well, I can control my attitude. I can control my enthusiasm. I can control my willingness to work hard to help that player have more fun, have more success, see value in what we're doing. And to me, that's what I'm always thinking about and always constantly trying to do a better job of. Now, I can't say that I've always been good at it, but I think now that I'm a little bit older and wiser, I understand that typically a player who has that quote unquote bad attitude, there's a lot of things that can be contributing to it. A blanket reaction, a blank situation where she's got a bad attitude, I'm going to cut her from the team. She's got a bad attitude, I'm going to punish her. She's got a bad attitude, I'm going to make an example of her, is leading to more problems than it is solutions. And that player might only need one person to really believe in them or to understand them or to support them or to care enough to change the way they're doing things in a lesson or in a practice or in a team dynamic to help them get on the right track. One of the things that I think all coaches start off thinking that they can help every player. And I think you can help every player. But now again, in a team dynamic, sometimes you have to find that balance between what's good for the individual player and what's good for the team. But my first challenge to all of you would be think about what's best for that player. Do everything you can to help that player and try to guide them, correct them, inspire them to make some changes and do some things differently. And only thinking about cutting them loose or getting rid of them or punishing them when what they're doing is really counterproductive to the team. You can manage it a lot of different ways, but to me, you might be the last gasp that player has to save their career or have a better life or feel more accomplished. We think about sports as a way for kids to gain confidence and for them to feel better about themselves and for them to be successful in the rest of their world and the rest of their lives. So let's do everything we can to try to help them get on the right track. I would never be judgmental of a coach who cuts a player because they have such a bad attitude, but cutting a player because she has a bad attitude should be, and at least in my opinion, after you've done everything you possibly can to try to help that player first. And if you've gotten to that point where you think you've done everything you can and it's still not registering, it's still not working, then we need to pass her along to somebody else, and hopefully that person will be willing to do everything they can to try to help that player get together and get it together. So that's going to wrap up this week's edition of Coach Prep. I want to make sure that we reach out to Coach Don and I with all your questions, comments, ideas, or suggestions. You can do that at everythingfastpitch@gmail.com or fastpitchprep@gmail.com. Either one of those email addresses will work. We also want you to consider becoming a patron. Go to patreon.com/everythingfastpitch. We're talking about $5, $10, or $20 a month donations. If you can see value in what we're doing and you want to support us, we would certainly love for you to come on board and contribute if you can. I want to make sure that you go to the fastpitchprep.com website, order your Square Cuts training discs. You can also have access to the YouTube channel and the blog post. There's tons and tons of information on our fastpitchprep.com websites. For Coach Don, who's on vacation, and our producer, Stan Lewis, this is Coach Torrey. Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you again next week.